Hi, Lawrence.
Merry Christmas, season's greetings. We've got quite a comprehensive session today on clean language, and we've got our own Sarah Skerritt that's going to be conducting that. Stuart's, unfortunately, his wife's poorly, so he's looking after his wife. He was going to join us quickly, but I've sort of said, and Tim has said, go and look after the family and make sure they're okay. So he's going to reschedule his third session for us for January. So we'll put him, when we've got our January session, we'll put his third session then. So I hope that you're all looking forward to it. I've seen the outline. It's looking really, really good and really, really interesting. As you know, Sarah has offered to do a half-an-hour supplementary session. It's not mandatory. I think you'll all probably be very interested, but I appreciate diaries being that they are. If it goes over into too long for you, please, just let yourselves out, and in advance have a great Christmas and New Year. So Tim, do you want to just introduce Sarah? I think she's online.
Yes, I can see Sarah. She's all ready to go. Just a couple of things I'd like to say. Merry Christmas to everyone. I have my festive jumper on. I'm off to see Star Wars this afternoon. That's really festive for me. And, just come out in the UK, so looking forward to that. Just a couple of things before we do go on to Sarah. We had a end of year strategic review with the programme directors last week, I think it was. Lots of new and exciting stuff coming for you guys in the new year. We're re-looking at repositioning our, not the brand's going to stay the same, but repositioning where we are into what I think is going to be a life-changing leadership development. So unlimited potential, life-changing leadership development, which we think fits exactly what we deliver, sets us apart from competitors. We recently lost a large contract to stakeholder-centered coaching, which is the Marshall Goldsmith approach to coaching. It's made us have a long, hard think about what we can do to meet that need. So if somebody comes to us and says, we want SCC coaching, we could say, well, actually what we've got on the table, which we're going to call objectives-based coaching. But there'll be more about that coming up in the future. The other thing is around supervision. We're planning to launch a supervision program for our associates next year, which would be a Zoom facilitated supervision thing that anyone can check into. Limited numbers because we don't want loads of people on each course, but and there's a small fee which we think will be £25 per session for people to receive supervision. But what it does mean is that our members, you guys in the community, can get proper professional accredited supervision for essentially 25 quid a session, which is much cheaper than I've seen it sold out there. And for those of you that don't have it, it just enhances our offering. For those people we're offering, when we're doing tenders as well, it just gives us that bit more credibility. So look out for a new website, new messaging, and the supervision stuff next year. So I don't want to take up too much time. Are you ready, Sarah? Okay? You need to unmute yourself because I saw you speak, but I didn't hear you. That's it.
Yep,
ready?
I'm ready.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Sarah's one of our coaches. She lives in France, and she's going to talk to us about clean language. I'm aware she's got some really good material to get through, and timing-wise, we're not sure how it's going to run. So, as Lawrence said, if you have got a 2 o'clock appointment, then go. Otherwise, stick around because I'm sure it's going to be worth listening to. And should we overrun to 2 o'clock? All right, Sarah, over to you. I'm really looking forward to it.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So we will finish by 2 o'clock. And we advertised that this week or this month we could have a special Christmas bonus. So if anybody does want to stick around afterwards, we've got something planned that will take approximately 25 minutes maximum. But we'll do a pause in between the 2 sessions so people who need to dash off can do. Is that okay? Can you just stick your hand up if that's all right with everybody? Brilliant. And while you've got the hand, who knows about clean language? Just stick your hand up. So a few hands up and a few wobbles. Okay, so my plan is that I'll give you a quick introduction to the origins of clean language. some examples of where it's currently being used, and then we're going to get using it with some very short little examples and some time at the end for a little bit of feedback, if that sort of suits everybody, just looking at the faces. So for those who don't know, Clean Language originated in the 1980s in New Zealand with a therapist who had quite an interesting background. His dad was in the Salvation Army and his mum was Maori, and so he was sort of a living segue of these two very different cultures. And he just started noticing things that therapists were doing at the time, and particularly how they would be distorting the words of their clients. So if I can just give you an example, something as simple as take a seat. When your client comes in and you take a seat, you're putting your stuff, which is that you think they should sit down, onto the client. Maybe he doesn't or she doesn't want to, perhaps they'd rather be standing up. That's one little example. Another of the phrases is something as simple as, oh, and would you like to tell me a bit more than that? And if you just think about the mental gymnastic that the client has to do, would you like to tell me a bit more about that? Would I like to? I don't know. Would I like to? Tell him. Do I want to tell him a bit more? What's a bit more? Do I want to tell them a lot more or a bit more? And so for these simple phrases that sometimes we just sort of chuck out there, would you like to tell me a bit more about that? You're actually making the brain of the client do quite a lot of gymnastics. And so David Grove started using some very, very simple questions where he took out as much syntax and as much unnecessarily vocabulary as possible to enable really to make a big separation between my stuff as the therapist. So to begin with, it was used as a purely therapeutic tool, and their stuff, the stuff of the client. And a couple of examples of the questions would be something like, and what kind of? And so there's a very specific syntax that we use with the Clean Language questions. They nearly all start with and the way that I picture that in my head is that it's like the baton of a relay. So the client will say something and you're extending, sorry, you can't see it on the thing, you're extending your hand out, and when there's all of that and you take it back and then give it, and so it's creating this fluidity between what they're saying, what you're hearing, and you're repeating back exactly the words of the client. And when he's hearing them or when she's hearing them, and then you're saying, and is there anything else about that? You're really opening a space for the client to explore their stuff. So we talk about clean as being the trunk of the tree. And then from then, there's lots of branches going off from this trunk. David Grove, just before he died, had started to experiment with space and how we can use space as a co-facilitator, and that there's lots of information that might be hidden or kept in the space. And he was working on emergent knowledge, the stuff that's coming out as we go through the process. And he was I never met him. He was quite a energetic, dynamic, slightly crazy kind of guy. And his work was really sort of formalized, if I can use that word, by James Lawley and Penny Tompkins, who came out of the NLP sort of world, and they modeled what David Grove was doing. He was doing it quite instinctively, intuitively. Sorry, you'd have to excuse me because I do a lot of my work in French, and so sometimes I get a bit stuck on my English words. So he was using a lot of intuition in the way that he was working. James Lawley and Penny Tompkins modeled how he did it and produced a book which is called Metaphors in Mind, and that's sort of that's the first structure that came out of this emergent knowledge that David Grove was creating. To begin with, it was very much used in trauma. Patients, veterans from the war, who David Grove realized that by using metaphor, and I'm sure this is, a lot of you are using this in your own work, by using metaphor, you allow a person to explore their stuff without having to relive the original trauma. You know, and like I say, he was doing it instinctively. There's now quite a lot of neuroscience and fact that's proving and showing how and why that works. And if I can just, like, I can give you another example. If I might say I might be feeling a bit uncomfortable. When I say uncomfortable, you're probably building pictures in your mind of what uncomfortable is, but you don't know what that uncomfortable is for me. So I might be feeling uncomfortable because my jeans are pinching, or that I've got shoes on that are hurting my feet. Or I might be feeling uncomfortable because I'm a bit nervous, or I might be feeling uncomfortable because it's a bit hot and sweaty, or I might just be uneasy. There's all these different perceptions of uncomfortable, and that's just one word. So the clean language questions are really designed to help the client go into their stuff and creating as much separation between what I'm thinking, the pictures I'm building in my mind, and what's really going on for the client. From the work that James Lawley and Penny Tompkins have done, like I say, there's the trunk of clean, and then these different branches. It's being used by coaches. There's another great book called Clean Approaches for Coaches, written by Marion Way, where you'll get if you read it, by the end of the book, you will be able to use clean in your coaching practice. There's also a book specifically for clean space. There's people who are using clean in art, clean in museums, clean in health. I've just got a big project to accompany a doctor's practice, and we're going to be creating patient groups to enable patients to talk about their symptoms far more quickly, far more clearly, and also helping them to deal with things like chronic pain that can't be cured, can't be resolved. Clean in the classroom. It's used in schools, getting kids to know what they need to do in order to learn at their best. And it's also really cool for introducing things like bullying. So, you know, when I say uncomfortable, and there's all these different perceptions of uncomfortable, when we talk about bullying, there's also lots of different perceptions about bullying. So calling somebody a fat pillock for you might just be a joke, but for somebody else, it actually could really hurt them. Kicking their bag as they're waiting for class, is that bullying? Is that not bullying? And by introducing things like clean language, it really creates a space where people can explore what bullying means to them. And so one of the other branches of the clean tree is something called systemic modeling, which was designed by Caitlin Walker. So at the time that David Grove was sort of experimenting and developing clean language, Caitlin was working with children who were just about to be excluded from school, mainly because of their behavioural problems, and her contract was really to get them back into the education system. She quite soon realised that if for that to happen, other stuff was going to happen beforehand. And so she sort of said to the kids, you know, so you guys, you're supposed to be going back to school, what needs to happen? And a sort of common agreement was that they wanted to learn how to control their temper. And so she didn't have a contract to do coaching. Clean coaching, and I think we put this in the original email, can go really deep. It can be like a, you know, a very efficient, sharp knife. You can't do that in a group. It's not fair. It's not fair to get one person to go very, very deeply into their stuff while there's everybody else around. And so Caitlin developed this way of working with clean language in groups, which is very light and bouncy. And so, oh, okay, and you want to explore your anger and what happens when you get angry. And there's one story that really had a big impact on me. He said when he woke up, and there was no breakfast, and you won't be able to see it because you can't see my tummy, but he got red to here, sort of above his belly button. And then he realized that his dad had been out drinking and there was no money for the bus and he had to walk to school, and he got red to here, just to his chest. And then when he got to school and he got bollocked for being late, there was red here. And it didn't take the group long to realize that it wouldn't take much for the red that was here to come rolling out. Okay, and if you're dealing with this in a group, we just leave it there. Okay, and for you, there's red here, here, and here. And who's got something different? And then you'd ask somebody else different, you know, in the group. Okay, and for you, when you get angry, it's like what? And for somebody else, it might be like a light switch that's turning on and off. And for somebody else, it might be like a tiger that's pacing around its cage. And you go around the group and you're just getting these kids to think about how they get angry. And so already it's a massive thing, because they don't realize that there's different ways of getting angry. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, shit, I didn't realize this sort of thing could happen. And they're learning all these different models of how different people get angry. From the point of the facilitator, there's no fixing. Okay, and you do it like that, and you do it like that, and you do it like that. Okay, and when you're red to here, then what happens? Well, it comes out. Okay, what happens just before? And you're getting these kids to build up a model of how they get angry. And then for Caitlin, the big thing was that the following week, this guy came back and he said, I've realized that when I'm angry here, I need to go and sit by blue. And when I sit by blue, red goes down and becomes purple. Oh my goodness. I've just given this kid who's, you know, from Kenya, he's had to leave his mum behind to come over to the UK with his dad, who's clearly, you know, they've got difficult living conditions. He's just learned how to control his anger. Wow. And not only has he learned how to control his anger, but the group has heard now how he controls his anger. And so they can start building models for what they want to do to control their anger. And they can keep an eye on his anger, and they can start, oh, okay, I'm picking up on the signs now that he's getting angry. And so in a self-supporting group, you can say, okay, we need to be careful because he's getting angry. He needs to, you know, he needs to go and sit by some blue. So Caitlin had this amazing experience, and she's in her book. If you, I think I saw Tim writing something down in the chat. It's called From Contempt to Curiosity. It's a really well-written book, and it's one of the nice things about it is how it's also very humble, and she shows that sort of the pitfalls and the mistakes that she's made along the way. But after she had this, you know, this great experience with the kids, one of her friends sort of said, do you think your stuff there would work in business? And she's like, well, okay, we'll give it a go. And yes, it does work in business. It works in the police force, it works in schools, it works in the health, it works anywhere where you've got a group who is interested in self-modeling. So how do we do stuff around here? How is it that we have these meetings that last forever and we don't get anywhere? What's happening? How is it that we've got these directors who are in conflict and nothing's happening? If you've got a group who's interested in self-modeling and self-regulating, then this systemic modeling, so it's the modeling of a system, giving the group the skills and the space to explore their stuff, then it's just fab, and I love it, and I suppose that's why I'm here, really, because it's something that I'm really passionate about. It's also something where it helps to be more than one facilitator, because you have to take quite a lot of stuff, and you've got to be really good at maintaining your own state. And so if there's two of you, you can actually use the stuff that's happening to the service of the group as well. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, clean language and systemic modelling. I've touched a little bit on the posture. I don't know if you've come across clean language. Some people, the questions are available online. It's not a secret, and in some ways, I quite like this metaphor of the tree, because you've got the tree trunk, you've got the branches, and then you've got the apples. And the hope is, I think, with a lot of people who are doing clean language, that the branches, the apples will fall off and will self-seed and more. So it's, you know, a lot of us are doing it to share. clean language in itself is something that you can use everywhere. You can integrate it into your daily life. You can introduce it into your coaching and your work practices. So it's really, you know, to get it growing. But there are some people who, you know, you can ask the questions and you sound like a woodpecker. You know, it's what would you like to have? Whoa, you know. So there's also your posture, and it's really a posture of inquiry and curiosity, and that's your stuff and this is my stuff, and we're separating and we're making space. And so when there's all of that, I thought we'd give it a go. On for happy, stick your hand up if you're happy to have a little bit of an exploration. So the two basic questions, and if you've got a pen and paper with you, and you can just jot them down, because when we go into the breakout rooms, you won't be able to see the chat. So like I said at the beginning, you're generally trying to start the sentence with an and when it's like that, what kind of is the first question, and so if you see them written down, you'll see what kind of X, and every time there's an X, you insert the client's words, and you keep the exact syntax of the client's words. And is there anything else about X? So I'm going to test something. Tricky online, because obviously, and tricky in a group, because I'm not going to be able to hear what you're all saying. So some of my questions will make sense, some of them might not make sense. Just go with it, see what happens, and then yeah, we'll see what happens. So thinking about you, and when you're coaching at your best, you're like what? And so for some of you, it might be a little bit too quick, and for some of you, the pace might be a little bit too slow, and I'm going to try and pitch it somewhere in the middle. When you're coaching at your best, you're like what? And just take a moment and check in with your body and see if there's any sensations in your body when you're coaching at your best. And when there is a sensation, and it might be in your body or around your body, does that sensation have a size or a shape? Is there a colour? A texture? A movement? Or a direction? And when there's all of that, is there anything else about you when you're coaching at your best? And in a minute, I'm going to ask Louise if she can put us into breakout rooms of 3s. And what I will invite you to do, we'll do it for 15 minutes, so 5 minutes each. And you've got one person coaching, one person as the client, and one person observing. This might be tricky because the deal is no fixing. All we're doing as the coach is helping the other person to build a strategy. So when they're coaching at their best, what happens before, what happens after? And use those 2 clean questions, and what kind of, and is there anything else about, to try and get the person to get as much information as possible as to what needs to happen before, during, and after when they're coaching at their best. Is that clear? Is that clear for everyone? Yeah, I'm getting a thumbs up. And then I could do with a little bit of a sign from Louise. Can you put us into breakout rooms for 15 minutes? Oh, it's happening.
We need to unmute.
Right, I am unmuted on here.
I think we're there.
We've got Simona, Nicholas and Sue to go into a room.
I can't see the click button to join the room anymore.
No, mine's disappeared as well. Shall we do it between us? Shall we go?
Let's give it a go.
Yeah.
So we've got 5 people in a room. Can we split it up into 2 rooms?
Yeah, the link came up for the room and then it vanished, so I can't.
Oh, and everybody's back again.
We're back.
Right. Okay. Louise, do you want to try and us in our rooms, and if we get a message on screen, can everyone respond to it? Because I.
Hello. Hi, Sarah.
Hey.
Hi. You're right.
How are you doing?
Yeah, really good, thank you. How are
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, okay. A little bit sort of, it would have been nice to have that 5 minutes beforehand to prepare, but never mind. Everything seems to be happening okay. Yeah.
Definitely. You got there in the end with the breakout room.
Yeah. So if we've got 15 minutes now, do you want to have a quick session, or do you what would you like to have happen now?
I really don't mind actually, because I wasn't quite sure, you know, what you wanted me to do, whether I was meant to be sort of doing part of this or whether I was meant to be, you know, obviously helping you. So I wasn't like 100% sure. So I haven't actually written everything down because I wasn't 100% sure what. But I mean, I'm quite happy to like answer questions and, you know, to be able to sort of, you know, answer bits and bobs. So.
Okay, well, I can give you a little experience if you want. You're not a coach, are you? You're the office manager. Okay, so how about if we do, when you're working at your best,
Right.
you're like what?
Oh my goodness. When I'm at my best, what would I describe myself as? Oh, probably on fire. I think that's a good one for me.
On fire. Yeah. Excellent. And when you're on fire, yeah, is there anything else about on fire?
I think for me, I think on fire indicates to me that, you know, things are going really, really well, and you're kind of a bit on a you're sort of like on a bit on a wheel, aren't you? You just keep moving further and further. So you know, I think when I'm on fire, it's often like when you have like a really, really good day, or there's lots of different things that happened, or sometimes things happen and perhaps new jobs come in. It's just maybe sometimes it's things that you don't always expect to happen. And I think that's what makes it more exciting when I have these sort of days, really.
And when it's exciting and things that you don't know are going to happen and on fire, is there a sensation in your body?
I suppose it's kind of happiness, I suppose. Yeah, I think it's probably, maybe kind of more happiness. Yeah.
Just go slow and sort of check in with your body. And when there's on fire and happiness, where is that happiness?
I think for me, I think it's when you actually do something really well, you know, actually feel that you've contributed a lot. And I think for me, that means a lot to me. It's just trying to like, you're kind of trying to think a bit more about why you're kind of feel this way, isn't it, and why you say these things. I'm not sure I can add anything else at the moment, I have to say.
So I'm just building a picture in my head about on fire and either like jumping over hot coals or there was sort of maybe a juggling of like you know, like the fire sticks or something like that. And I'm just wondering what it's like for you when you're on fire.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time I'm constantly juggling everything, to be honest. So it's quite nice when maybe it's more of the unexpected happens, or something that you've been waiting for, or, you know, for me, often it's a lot of like chasing up on different things. And I think for me, I think once you actually get what you actually require, I think it gives you a bit of a satisfaction, I think.
So thinking about how you get yourself into that state when it's like it's exciting and chasing things up and juggling lots of things, what happens just before juggling lots of things and excited?
I think life is just a kind of more of a maybe a slower pace. Not so much slow, but it's probably maybe a lot slower than when you've actually got everything that like kind of sorts into place.
And there's a slower pace and then everything slots into place and there's juggling. And what's in between the slower pace and juggling?
Slower pace and juggling. That's a very good question. Answer it. I don't know. I suppose for me it's a bit between the two, and I'm not quite sure exactly what I would call that between bit. I think I'm just trying to put myself in that situation now, really.
So what I'm trying to do is to, you know, build the picture so that if I wanted to be a really good office manager, I would know the steps that you're taking, and it's like being on fire and juggling lots of things and happy and satisfied. And before there's a slower pace, and how do you get from slower pace to being happy and juggling and on fire?
I think it's putting the steps in place. I think it's actually putting all those steps in place so that you're sort of ready for it. I think it's I think for me, because I never quite know, it's always really busy, but sometimes it can go up an extra level. Yeah, I think in a way I just try and make sure that I'm not, I think as long as I'm nicely organized and I know exactly, you know, where I am, it's absolutely fine. And you feel that the next step up isn't really a big problem, because, you know, everything that you've actually done sort of work up to that maybe being on fire sort of situation. So like all your steps are already there.
Mm. And when being on fire, is there anything else about that fire? Does it have a colour?
Yeah, I think bright.
Bright.
Yeah, I think so.
And does it have a size or a shape?
Yeah, I think for me it's just maybe like a fire that you'd have maybe in your lounge or something like that. Not huge or anything, but something which is sort of nice and bright.
Mm.
So just a normal sort of maybe like a fire perhaps, you know, that you'd have in your lounge, dining room.
And is there anything else about that fire that you'd have in your lounge or your dining room?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's the warmth and everything, isn't it? It's sort of something, and I think possibly when things happen, and it actually makes you feel sort of quite good inside as well, because all of a sudden everything like comes together. Yeah.
And there's a warmth.
Yeah.
And it's like the fire in your lounge or dining room, and everything comes together.
I feel content. I think it's content. Everything else.
And there's a reason why you're doing it.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's all very interesting actually. You know, I think about it now, and I don't think sometimes you realise, you know, days can be so different, and you just get days where actually, you know, it all just kind of slots into place,
and it's like a fire in your lounge or your dining room, and it's warmth, and everything comes together.
Yeah.
And now you know all of that, what else do you know about working at your best?
I think for me, I think as long as I keep everything up, and as long as I keep everything going, and you know, because often I'm spinning quite a few plates at the same time, and I think as long as those are all, you know, sort of in place, then it's absolutely fine for me. And that's what I always try and do. I mean, last night I was working in the evening because I just need to make sure that everything is kind of ready to go the next day. I don't have to do it, but I do. Not all the time, but you know, if there's suddenly a big build up of stuff, I mean, I'm quite happy just to sit there and, you know, get on with it. But you know, Tim's really good anyway, so he lets me, you know, do what I need to do and accrue some hours if I need to. So you know, for me it works really well. So you know, I've got a good boss.
And when you know that everything's in place, then what happens?
I just work on it then. I think that's when you up the ante in many respects, and that is why you think, right, I'm going to get that sorted out today, that's going to be done, and then I'll sit down and have a chat with Tim, and then between the two of us, if it's something that I can't do possibly myself, then it's something that maybe we can kind of do together. So I think that's kind of more of the teamwork. So that's really nice. Yeah.
Do we need to bring the guys back, or will they come back automatically?
They should come back automatically because I put it in 15 minutes.
Okay.
And with 60 seconds, and then they'll come back in.
Okay.
But they seem to have been gone quite a while. But I'm just looking at the top, and it's got 3 minutes and 30 seconds of the.
Oh, okay. Great. Brilliant. Okay.
So you're going to be, am I just going to follow exactly what you sent through to me today, or how do you want me to?
Well, when they come, we've done this main session, breaking them out into the rooms, and then we'll just stay in the main room, and then we'll see how many people stay for the other bit. I have done it before where we've sent them off really quickly into the breakout rooms for 6 minutes, like on that, like a thing I sent you, and it works out okay. So if we can do that, it would be good. It gets everybody talking, it gets them all sort of getting to know each other, and it just depends whether you're comfortable doing it.
No, it's fine. But do I need to mix them all up?
Yeah, so I think you can just do it on random. Instead of assigning them to a room, you just let the computer do it.
An automatic one then.
Yeah.
One this time, and it was purely just going from the names that were coming up and just kind of clicking.
Yeah. If you do it on automatic, if somebody ends up twice in the same, in a room with someone else, it doesn't matter. They just sort of go, oh, this is funny, this is a coincidence, and carry on. So
okay, so that's going to be for 6 minutes, and you'll let me know once
yeah.
you do that. Right, okay. Is that going to be the only one, or are you going to be doing any?
I'd like to do it 3 times if we can.
3 times.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's
so we'll run through this session. Everybody's going to come back, and hopefully we'll get some learnings and find out all this sort of stuff, and we'll finish it probably just before the hour to make sure people can go if they need to. And then all I'm going to do is say, okay, for this quick Christmas bonus, let's think about Christmas, and for Christmas to be just as you'd like, it'll be like what? And Louise, can you put us all into breakout rooms for 6 minutes in groups of 3s, and we'll just go for it. And it is a bit like speed dating. So they just get pioinged off into these rooms, and then they come back, and I just say, okay, and when Christmas goes like that, you'll be like what? And Louise, can you put us up into breakout rooms again? And then they come back, and I say, for you to be like that, what support or resources do you need? And they go off again, and then we'll come back to the main room, share some feedback, and then finish. And we should be done by 2:30 your time.
right. Okay, perfect.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, just tell me. You just say, Louise.
Yeah, I'll give you a heads. I'll say, and in a minute I'll get Louise to put us in some groups.
Yeah.
Give them a short sort of invitation of what they need to do. Instruction, that's the word I'm looking for. Instruction. Send them off, and we just get to hang out here and chat some more. So.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've got 19 seconds.
Okay, so they're going to start popping back, and we just stay here now and until the end of this bit.
Okay, cool. Gives me a bit of practice actually with these breakout rooms, so it's all good.
Yeah, I did a really big conference a couple of weeks ago. There's 75 people using Zoom, and it just blows my mind, the technology that we've got available. It's just...
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? So the breakout rooms will be closing in 39 seconds.
Okay, we've got people coming back.
That's good.
It's always funny watching people as they pop back from these. Oh, I know, traveling through space. It's incredible.
All the compliant people coming back now, Sarah. First.
Oh, yeah.
We've been terribly well behaved in your absence.
Oh, I see. I don't believe it. You see, you could also think that the other people are the ones that don't want to leave their breakout rooms because they're having such fulfilling and enriching conversations.
Absolutely.
Are we all back now? I think so. So, what was that like? What did you learn? If you just want to unmute yourselves or give a little sign. Karina, what did you learn?
Well, I was with Lawrence, and it was interesting because obviously we'd been given a bit of a head start by yourself because you gave us sort of the guideline question, so we'd already been kind of ticking over on it. But so I sort of coached Lawrence first, and the answers that he gave were so crystal clear to me, and it painted such a clear picture for me about what he was talking about that it almost didn't even require sort of follow-up questions. Obviously, I did carry on with the follow-up questions, but it did offer a lot more clarity about where he was coming from, just because we'd already given some thought to those sort of metaphors that that go with it. Yeah, we went into sort of one question, and there was so much depth that came with the answer. So yeah, I thought it was really effective.
Thank you. And who's got something different to that?
I found it slightly challenging to use the simplicity of the question, the language that you used, but I did that, and it was really powerful, actually. Rather than dressing it up or stacking questions or anything else, it was actually just those few words really opened a lot. I thought it was pretty interesting to see the simplicity of it.
Okay.
As Simon was coaching me in that conversation, and what was really interesting was that he was really religiously sticking to the, plugging the word into the end of the phrase. And you could see he was really making sure that that was absolutely right. But the power of it was phenomenal. It was quite surprising how, when he sort of said, tell me about, or was it, is there anything else about X? And using sort of quite an odd word, like, is there anything else about, we use space or weight, or is there anything about the emotion you felt, which was in my case. And it just raised me into a very difficult position. I was really struggled to answer. I had to really think about it, which, bearing in mind that a robot could have probably plucked a word out of my phrase, chucked it in there and thrown it back at me, and the impact that it had. I'm not saying Simon's a robot, but just saying that, that that's the way it works. And it was still impactful, which is quite impressive.
And for Tim, it was powerful, and for Simon, it was simplicity, and Karina, there's clarity. And who's got something different to that?
Can I point out, from an observer's point of view, Sue and Nicola were working together, and on reflection, from an observer's perspective, it was very clear that it has a lot of similarity to parts therapy and hypnosis in hypnotherapy, in which you give the unconscious a chance to build a metaphor, which allows the unconscious to run riot and build pictures, which creates feelings. And the whole psychological framework is very similar to parts therapy, which is something that I use a lot in hypnosis. Which, given that I've actually studied clean language as well, I'd never actually noticed before. So really,
for myself, I thought it's a great way to focus.
Oh, I think we've lost Nicholas.
Either that, or it was a very, very focused response.
Yeah.
Nicola doesn't have the best reception. We found he froze a couple of times in our session.
Okay, so waiting for him to come back. We've got Steve, who's saying that for him it's similar to parts therapy, and he's never had that realization before. And who's got something different to that?
I was probably overanalyzing it and kind of comparing it with kind of how I work currently, exploring. And I guess the challenge I found was as the replication of the language, and then not wanting to take it in my direction, and come to a conclusion. So I was really thought-provoking, wanting to take the client to some sort of conclusion with it, and just keeping it, as you said, clean. It's a great word to use. So just allow them to sit in how it is for them.
And sorry, Nicholas.
I found use of colour as well and temperature when Karina and I spoke, in terms of how we gauge how we're feeling, how the client's feeling. And I really started to get the red sitting next to the blue in terms of temperature, which Karina sort of taught me through. So that for me was sort of really enlightening in terms of what probably is subconsciously there. You are testing, but just to get clients to see it in colour and temperature would be brilliant.
That's bold from an ex-lawyer there, Lawrence.
Absolutely.
We've got an anger issue there, Lawrence. So I'm sure it's not.
We've got Dave and David and Gareth and Simona, and we haven't heard anything from you. Anything that you'd like to share, Gareth?
So I found two challenges. I guess the kind of almost like the setup, like how to introduce the questions. Maybe it's just because it's an exercise and I wasn't 100% clear on how to start it. The experience I had was quite similar to when I've been trained in Clean before, where if you know something about the model, and typically the client won't unless you tell them about it, it can feel a little bit modelly, like the questions are very deliberate and sometimes a bit repetitive. If the client doesn't know anything about it, which is from experience probably the case more often than not, I found that they're quite a useful set of questions maybe to come back to. Sometimes as coach, you might fret about worrying about where the next question might come from or where you might go next with something. And I found the simplicity of the questions, to echo what others have said, can be a really good way of opening up a conversation which an answer might suggest has been concluded already. That I thought was interesting about it. I think it's something that I could see myself using. Not all the time in sessions or not with all clients, but certainly something that would be.
I don't know. Can I speak?
Yep, David Adams.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know whether it's what I was taught. I can't remember because it's a long time ago. But I find the questions rather boring and stilted, and even more stilted, if you like, is the technique of just giving back a word that the client has said, particularly if it's an emotive word. So if they say, "I feel sad," the coach would just say, "Sad." Now, I was taught that technique, and for me that works and is not as stilted, although it's surprisingly, as the full question. I don't know what anybody else would think about that, and whether it's part of Clean or something else.
And so for David, they're rather boring and stilted, and Gareth, they're something to fall back on but not use all the time. And for Sue, it's thought-provoking. And for Stephen, there's a relevance or a link with parts therapy. And Simona or Dave Spencer, anything that you want to add?
Don't have a lot to add other than sort of Gareth and the other David. We had a discussion. I wasn't convinced with the prefixing of the word and whether I got hung up on that too much, because the questions that followed generally seemed to be open questions that weren't leading anyway. So I wasn't quite sure of that. I know Gareth spoke about, does the client know the methodology or not, and I don't know whether that had an impact. But yeah, I think it's got a place. I don't think it's an absolute. It's a tool that you can blend in as required. I think we had a discussion as well around sort of intuitive understanding of where the client was and listening and feeling to what they're saying and how they're saying it, and then responding into that way. So I'm not sure as a threesome, or is it just me? We got it totally as maybe you prescribed it. I'm not sure.
And when it's got a place, what kind of place is that place?
I think Gareth sort of touched on that stuck moment, and it's a place to maybe unstick things or to give that sort of pause, maybe to enable a bit more silence to be used to sort of draw things out of people. It's early days for me.
And a stuck moment. What kind of stuck moment when it's a stuck moment?
If the client is drying up and if you're looking for them to continue thinking and that sort of anything else has dried up, or it's a potential lever that might take them somewhere else or allow them to reframe and take something. I'm not explaining this very well, am I?
And Simona, what's happening for you?
I do see its value. It's very similar to other tools that I use. So I'm looking forward to exploring it a bit further, because a lot of the coaching work that I do when we're doing some of the deeper delve into certain things, I very much use a less is more technique, and sort of creating space and focusing on particular words and using some of the structure that is quite similar to this. I do a lot of work in the thinking environment as well. So I can see the value in it, and I do like to mix and match my tools depending on the situation. So I am looking forward to learning more about it. So thank you.
Great. So conscious of the time, it's 4 minutes to 2. This is probably a neat place if anybody needs to disappear to do so with grace and elegance. Lawrence or Tim, I don't know if you want to sort of say anything about upcoming events, or do we just go straight into the next bit, which is the opportunity to carry on a little bit more practicing clean?
I'm afraid I have to take my leave. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful Christmas. I will speak to you all very soon.
Yeah, likewise. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks everybody. My group. Sarah, thank you very much for introducing me to that. I'm really actually very excited about the idea of using it with leadership teams. I can see it being really useful to unlock some of that kind of tension at a senior level. So thank you.
Well, so I'm running some online practice sessions, and we're always looking for newbies to come along and sort of complement the ranks. So if you're interested, then please get in touch.
Yeah, we'll do. No, thank you very much. Thanks. And if we don't contact people beforehand, please have a great Christmas, won't you?
Yeah.
All. Bye-bye.
Bye. So thinking about Christmas, and when Christmas goes just as you like, Christmas will be like what?
Over in a flash.
So what we're going to do, we're going to, in a moment, I'll ask Louise if she'll, how many are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So Louise, can you put everybody other than you and me into a breakout room? So we'll do 2 breakout rooms of 3, and we'll do the same thing again. So one of you coaching, one of you, no, all 3 together. You've got 6 minutes. 6 minutes, so 2 minutes each, a little bit like speed dating. When Christmas goes just as you'd like, it will be like what? And we'll get Louise to put you into breakout rooms. And Nicolas.
Hello.
Where are you? Are you?
I'm in Paris now.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have such a bad connection. I keep switching off and on, and sometimes, when I speak, I'm going away, and I can't hear everybody's interventions. So that was really interesting, Sarah. Thank you.
If it's you and me, we can work in French if you want.
On peut travailler en français or in English, as you prefer.
As you wish. Where are you going to be? Are you going to be in France or in the UK for Christmas?
No, I'll be in Egypt doing some scuba diving.
Okay.
So it's going to be great. It's going to be warm. It's going to be wet. It's going to be many colors and slowly moving as, animals in the sea do. And it's going to be warm and calm and energizing.
It's going to be warm and calm and energizing. And is there anything else about energizing?
It's something that comes from inside. It's a very nice feeling. Comes from a little spot somewhere, between the heart and the tummy. And it expands gradually until you feel like absolutely not tired, very relaxed, both relaxed and active.
And relaxed and active and energizing and calm, and a little spot near the heart. And for you, Louise, when Christmas goes just as you'd like, it will be like what? Oh, everybody's back again.
Okay.
What happened?
I don't know. I don't know. Okay, let's just. I'm not sure at the moment, to be honest.
Okay, let's not worry about it. We can just all stay together. So when Christmas goes just as you'd like, for Nicola, it will be warm and energizing and calm and relaxing. And who's got something else? When Christmas goes just as you'd like, it will be like what? Karina.
Well, funny enough, David and I didn't quite get that far, but I did have in my head, because my first thought, which I suppose raises an interesting point-ish, is that Christmas will be like Christmas. Like, you know, Christmas is often used as a metaphor in and of itself. That's, you know, my sort of, I suppose, idealistic view of what Christmas is and what it represents in itself describes how my Christmas would be, if that you see what I mean. I suppose as far as clean language goes, that's a tricky one, because Christmas already carries a load of connotations with it and a load of, you know what I mean?
And it'll be like Christmas, and an idealistic version of Christmas. And who's got a question for Karina?
How does that make you feel, Karina?
Warm and fuzzy.
So for Karina, it's warm and fuzzy and Christmas like Christmas is. And who's got something different when Christmas goes just as you'd like? Lawrence.
Like sitting in a new pair of pajamas, drinking all day and eating.
And sitting in a new pair of pajamas and drinking all day and eating. And who's got a question for Lawrence?
Why does that make you happy?
Because I only have new pajamas at Christmas.
Okay, and Lawrence is in his pajamas and he's drinking and eating. And for Karina, it's like Christmas is and warm. And for Nicola, it's an energy that's relaxing and energizing. And who's got something different again? David.
Yeah, well, I have a background where Christmas was not really celebrated, tiny family. But in later life, starting about 10 years ago, I have a new family who take the most amount of enjoyment out of being together. So my enjoyment is, yes, joining them, which is new, but also I need to have the ability to opt out, whether that's going for a long walk or just going in my study and reading a book. And of course, that doesn't go down terribly well, but it's good for me.
And who's got a question for David?
Is there anything else?
What sort of else would you like, Karina?
Whatever comes to mind, David.
No, I think that's it. I think that's me in a nutshell. Or my Christmas in a nutshell.
And joining
coaches don't make terribly good coaches, do we?
No, absolutely not.
And joining in and opting out. And who's got something different to that? Tim and Louise.
So I think for me, a little bit along the lines of David, it's about being together. For me, it's about family. It's about doing things together all day, whatever that might be, whether it is watching telly, which I don't generally approve of, or whether it's playing games or eating. So it's about doing things together, and that all comes together with my great Christmas cheese board that comes out about 4 o'clock that I spent about a month building. I was in Fortnum and Mason yesterday, spent a fortune on cheese, and I source it. So I bought cheese in Wales, I bought cheese in Scotland, and it all comes together. And the idea of that is everyone together. That's why I do it, and I love cheese. But you all pitch in together, and it's, you're all community food.
So if we stand and ask for a smell that came with that, we'd all be probably quite familiar with what your Christmas smells like.
Whenever I take my son into a cheese shop, his reaction is hilarious because the smell. He stands there in the shop going, I have to send him out because he's not worked that out. Bless him.
And for Tim, it's all about being together, and David, it's opting out and joining in. And Louise, what's Christmas for you?
I think it's just a real family time. A bit of parents really, matches, you know, to get the pajamas on, spend all day in jams and eat and drink too much. You know, that for me is Christmas. Everyone together and yeah, I'm with very much look forward to Christmas.
And when Christmas is like that, and family and cheese board and all joining in and opting out, and warm and like Christmas is, and pajamas and eating and drinking and Egypt and energizing, and when there's all of that, you'll be like what? When Christmas is like that, you'll be like what?
Peace.
Tim's peace. What kind of peace?
Not having my anxiety being the loudest voice in my head.
And not having anxiety. And peace.
And happy.
And for Lawrence, it's happy. What kind of happy is that happy?
Content and relaxed.
And content and relaxed. And who's different to that, all the same?
Letting it all happen.
And letting it all happen. And is there anything else about letting it all happen?
Well, you're not struggling for anything. You let things just meander along. You know that in a few days you'll have to change your attitude, but having that few days where you just let go, I find very valuable.
And having a few days where you let things go, and happy and peace and no anxiety. And who's got something different to that? Louise, Nicholas and Karina, anything? When Christmas is just like you want it to be, you'll be like what?
I think I can
sorry. My soul and everybody around me.
And connected to everyone around you. And what kind of connected is that kind of connected?
A spiritual connection.
And a spiritual connection. And for you, Karina, you'll be like what?
Relaxed. I think I can get on board with what Tim said about the sort of letting go of the anxieties, just allowing yourself to go, I won't worry about that today, I'll worry about that. You know what I mean? You can kind of give yourself permission to go, put it down and go and just have fun and eat some more. So yeah, I can get on board with that. Worry free.
Worry free. And anything else about worry free?
Just, I suppose, being more like being fully present in the room, in the room, with with whatever it is that's going on. You can kind of not have to think, oh, but when I get back, I've got to do this, and I need to send that email to so and so, and I've got this to do, and I've got to finish this podcast, and I've got to do that. You know what I mean? You can just put all of it down, so that and almost sort of forget all about everything and just be 100% present in the room at the time.
And putting it down and being 100% present with a presence. And for David, letting it go. And for Nicola, being spiritually connected to the people around him. And Tim, no anxiety, no voice in my head. And Lawrence, content and happy. And for you, Louise?
Yeah, I think I would just go with Lawrence, happy and content, because I think, those 2 days you can just be in your own little world, it's just a world, and you, as you say, you can forget about everything that's going on, and it's just a wonderful time. It's just a real nice family time.
And thinking about how you'd like Christmas to be and how you'd like to be, what support or resources do you need for you to be like that?
I think it's just having everyone around me, you know, everyone I care about. So, you know, that includes all my animals as well. So as long as I've got all them around, then that's to me, that's happiness.
And so for Louise, it's having everyone around her. And who's got something different when you might need some support or resources to be just as you'd like over Christmas?
I can add to Louise that I agree having people around you, but they all have to be on the same page. Because if they're not, then that's not peace. That's, you know, that's a whole different thing. I'm not saying I don't get that, because I do generally, but I think it's important to bear in mind we're all in one direction.
Yeah, common purpose and direction, and everybody contributing for it all to happen.
And for you, Tim and Lawrence, you need everybody to be on the same page and one direction and contributing. And what needs to happen for everybody to be on the same page?
Well, I think we all need Davids who just meander and do whatever turns up. And when somebody says, let's watch the Queen's speech, doesn't kick off and say, we're not watching the Queen's speech because we're in the middle of the meal and we don't get down from the meal. And then, you know, rather than David's like, yeah, whatever. So we need more Davids in our Christmas.
More Davids. And can you have more Davids in your Christmas?
Everyone wants a David in their Christmas.
Everyone wants a David. And everybody on the same page and nobody kicking off. And what needs to happen for that? Just let me leave you with that. And for you, David, and when letting go, what support or resources do you need to be like that?
I'm very fortunate in what's around me. The family does what needs to be done. And they're great cooks. And they get on very well with each other. And it's just, I've begun to take it for granted. Perhaps I shouldn't, but I have.
And joining in and opting out.
Yes.
And letting go.
When necessary, when it's appropriate, when it feels right. I think that's the important thing, when it feels right.
And when it feels right. And for you, Karina, what support or resources do you need?
From my view, I think for all of that, there needs to be familiarity. So a certain amount of tradition and routine almost, because I mean because I'm like Tim, we don't really do TV on Christmas Day. It's all kind of, you know, family stuff and chatting and whatnot. But we're all on the same page because we all know what to expect when Christmas happens. This is what we do, this is what we don't do, not as a rule, not as a, you know, it's never been spoken about, but it's just always been that way. And so kind of, you know, everyone in the family is automatically expecting certain things and that kind of stuff. And of course it's, you know, they are familiar people anyway and familiar faces.
And is there anything else? Oh, Louise, sorry. No?
Hello, I'm back.
Sorry, I didn't know if you were saying something.
No, I was just listening, and I was, you know, like what Karina was saying, I think that's sort of very much exactly the way I'd be thinking as well. I think as long as you've got people around you that you're used to, and you know, it's kind of more like a routine, isn't it, that kind of we follow on these days. So that's
and it's a routine and everyone's on the same page, and David might be taking things for granted, and there's a moment and stepping in and stepping out, and for Tim the voice of anxiety to go away. And when there's all of that, what do you know now about Christmas?
Tim likes cheese.
Tim likes cheese.
And it's made up of a variety of perspectives, actually, but and some interesting things to think about in terms of how we can achieve what it is we would like to happen.
Tim likes cheese and interesting perspectives. Anything else that you know now about Christmas?
I think listening to David's point of view, that he hasn't had a past where he hasn't celebrated Christmas and now does, is a new viewpoint from my point of view, because that's never been my way of seeing it. So it's interesting to hear that slightly refreshing viewpoint on it, because he's, you know, an experienced man, but come into Christmas late, and just see how he sees that differently. I find that quite interesting.
Anything else that you know now about Christmas? Okay, and so anything that you want to share about this little experience? If you want to give me any feedback either about this or the other bit, or ask any questions, I'm open and the floor is yours. Karina.
I was just going to say, I mean, first of all, thank you very much. I've never had any training in clean language. I knew roughly what it was, but I didn't really have a clear understanding of it. So that's really helpful. And I think I agree with what sort of Gareth was saying earlier and things like that, that there's, because so much, I mean, actually Lawrence and I spoke about this when we were in our breakout bit, that you know, I think it's a really good tool to have in sort of coach's toolkit. But you wouldn't necessarily pull it out all the time, because obviously there are times where people would kind of think, well, why are you repeating what I'm saying, and why, yeah, you've got to gauge when is the appropriate moment. But I think for me the most useful thing is to sort of throw in occasionally these questions about metaphors. What would that look like? If it had a shape, what shape would it be? If it had a color, what color would it be? And that kind of thing, just for someone who's struggling to express themselves, but you can see wants to. I think that'd be a really useful tool.
Thank you.
I think from my point of view, I like the style, Sarah. I think I can't speak for you in a clean way, but you appear calm and relaxed and joined up, and that I like. I think I like this white space you put between your words. I think that has value, and it certainly worked for me. You know, I think we haven't even touched the start of this subject, have we? I mean, you know, I'm not surprised you wanted to start with 1 hour and 40 minutes. As Lawrence said beforehand, you initially said, you know, this subject could be 3 days of unpicking your own judgments. And having said that, the beauty of it is we can all go away now and use it in the short time we have been together. So I think, you know, in that respect, you've achieved both targets there. And we're all bright people. You know, David picked up the fact that he said, well, you know, this question's a bit clunky for me, but we all know that we're all bright enough to be able to reword this to make it work for us, not necessarily trot out the same questions like each time over and over and annoy the coachee. Intelligence will pick up on that all day long anyway. I'm very aware of all this changing and start going off in different directions, short questions, long questions, you know, just stuff variety to the coaching session. So I think, you know, it's been worth doing, and hopefully a benefit to all the guys who are listening. So thank you. Lawrence, he did say his aunt with dementia is living with him, and she was due home, and I suspect that's what's happened. And he's going to need to be there to get her in the house and sit her down. So if we don't see him come back, he's looking after his aunt with dementia.
Well, for me, I think it's sort of an elegant place to bring the session to an end. I don't know if, David, you wanted to add anything?
I've just got one question. As a coach, I was always taught that silence could be used very effectively, and I use it a lot. Does it come into this clean language strategy, or is it something quite separate?
For me, the essence of clean is to provide a space for the client to explore what the client wants to explore. Your attention is 100% on the client, and you're also observing things like their posture. And so you can also question the parts of the body. So a foot that starts tapping, or hand or a whatever, then you could also say, and what does your foot know about that? You also, some people, you're observing their face and you can see their eyes going up here, and you might say, and what's happening when your eyes go up there? So you use every information that the client is providing you with, and you are very respectful of the time it takes. So some people will answer the questions quite quickly, other people will need time, and throughout a session you might start quite paced and then it might go more slowly as you're leading somebody into a metaphor and you're developing their metaphoric landscape. Then they will need more time to explore things that new information to them. So for me, clean is like a dance where you are constantly adjusting your tempo, your speed, your pace, not necessarily to match the person. Sometimes you want to change them. You know, you don't want to let them go on this amble where they're going to get lost. You might want to be bringing them over here, but that's, you know, that's their objective. Does that answer the question?
I think it does. I need to give it some thought, but apart from that, that's very helpful. Thank you.
When the clean language questions, there's 12 basic questions. There's lots of other questions. There's also clean-ish. I mean, there's downright dirty. And it's the skill of the facilitator is to use the right questions to enable the person to have the experience. So like I said at the beginning, you can have somebody who's read the questions online and they whap the questions out and they're crap, quite honestly, because they're not respectful. So there's also where it's like a spotlight, and the clean questions is obviously there is also the facilitator, and so while you might be clean in your questions, you can't help but lead them somewhere. So you're constantly having to make a choice. So somebody says, I have to, there's times for joining in and there's times for opting out. So when I have that sentence, I can pick any of those words that I want to ask the questions about. So I might say, what kind of opting out is that opting out? But that will take you down the route of exploring opting out. Or I can take you onto the joining in, or I might ask a question about time. And when there's a time for joining in and a time for opting out, is there anything else about that time? Or I might say, and when there's a time for opting in and opting out, I can't think of I can't do it. I can't do it, but you can pick where you want to put the person's attention. And so the skill of the facilitator is also to observe where they are choosing to put the client's attention. And I just need to be aware of it and say, okay, when I ask that question, I'm taking him there. Is that because I want to go there, or is that because I
think he should be there? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the clean questions really are to try and separate as much as possible my stuff, my opinions, and their stuff.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Obviously, Lawrence's aunt has survived.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely Christmas. Really good.
And you?
Yeah.
You too. Have a lovely Christmas.
All right.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.